Hey.
Hello, and welcome back to Night Shift with Andrea Up Late. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Brian Sanders. How you doing, Brian?
Wonderful.
Wonderful. If you're new here, Brian is a retired homicide lieutenant, so he obviously provides a lot of insight into the shows that we have because this is a true crime podcast. And so we often cover unresolved or unsolved, and he always is able to give us a lot of knowledge when it comes to investigative work, interview techniques, what would be typical or not typical at a crime scene, etc. So, welcome, Brian, and welcome to all of you. We hope we have some new listeners here. This is a weekly live show on YouTube, so we will sometimes engage in the chats before and then after the show has concluded. But we also stream wherever you listen to your audio podcast. So you can listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, etc. So if you are listening now, whether you're new or not, if you would like to hit download, subscribe, likes, the thumbs ups, all the things, that's always very, very helpful. We do appreciate you so much. So, Brian, how you been? You got anything you want to start off with, or we're going to get right into it?
Let's just get right into it. I don't have anything new.
Yeah, nothing? All right. So, guys, we do usually cover cases, like I said before, that have gone cold, that are unresolved, or, on their way to being solved. I guess in that sense, this case is no different. The difference, I would say, however, is that we don't often cover current, ongoing cases. So, meaning the ones that if you hop on Reddit or YouTube or Google, or every news outlet right now is covering, usually that's not what we're doing. And I don't have, I guess, a very good reason for that other than I'm not necessarily thinking about trending, if you will, in like online media world. And I just kind of feel like everybody kind of has the same information. So I'm not sure what difference, that our voices could lend to it. But we did want to cover a case today. We've been asked by a few of you, and, I think it has captivated a lot of people because it's, our brains sadly are starting to be geared, not just ours, but a lot of us who listen to a lot of these crime cases, right, to start to think a certain kind of way, or can be a little cynical. And we try our best not to do that. We try to come to all cases with an open mind and just kind of let the information that we have kind of lead us, where we go. But this case that we're going to cover tonight is the case of missing Jack and Lilly Sullivan out of Nova Scotia. So Jack is 4 years old and Lily is 6. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And so this show is going to be a little bit different than our typical show because I'm not breaking down, giving you a big story, right? A big timeline where I've written 20 pages of notes and studied and contacted people and tried to figure things out. This case is pretty much all at your fingertips. Anything that we tell you is likely not going to be something that you can't find out your own self. However, we do want to kind of put it in a streamlined timeline for you, kind of all in one place. And the thing about that is, it's like the event took place, and then 3 or 4 or 5, 6 days of searching and investigative work goes on. It sounds a little quiet for a few days. The search gets re-energized in a different kind of way. And then here we are. It's now been a month. As of yesterday, June 2nd was 1 month since the children have been reported missing. Again, they're 4 and 6, and this was in a rural area just outside of Nova Scotia, Canada. Okay, so that's what we're dealing with, and that's why I say this has captivated, as you can imagine, so many people, probably many of you as well. Like I said, a lot of you guys requested this, but in saying that, it's not something that I can come on or Brian can come on every 2 or 3 days and give you a big update, because sadly, that's kind of not been the case. And since it is ongoing, there's only so much that we can gain. So you will hear us talk about the RCMP. That would be the police, the investigators working on this case there in Canada. And you'll hear us reference them a lot. So really, this is going to be kind of a breakdown of a timeline. You're going to get to listen to a couple of times that the children's mother and stepfather have been interviewed when they were on camera. And then, kind of figure it out for yourself what you think. Do certain things seem suspicious, or sadly, are we just becoming kind of jaded with this kind of things and really putting like a bad lens over our eyes for parents? I mean, is it that? So So take a listen, and I think we're gonna get right to it. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Alrighty. I do apologize if you are a viewing audience member on YouTube, because usually the way we set up our studio is on the network, the platform that we use for it. We set it up and we have to do this little switcheroony at the beginning of the show that you usually don't see happening, that has Brian and I looking at each other when we turn and talk. But that's not the reality of the way we're set up in studio. And that feature has evidently been having issues on the system recently. So if we automatically turn to look at each other while we speak, we will be looking like this. Yeah, in different directions. So, did you look the opposite?
I looked the opposite.
Well, never mind.
Because on my screen it's normal for some reason.
Oh, okay.
So,
well,
who knows?
Who knows? All right, guys. Well, let's get to it. So, like I told you, these kiddos have been missing now for a month as of yesterday. So I am going to just pull up this one little snippet of an article right now that gives you a little bit of just exactly what happened that morning. So this is, let me show you the home that is in question here. This would be where Jack and Lilly lived with their mother and their stepfather. Now, please keep in mind, he is continuously referred to as stepfather, and he calls himself their stepfather. We don't have actual legal knowledge that they're married, but I digress. That's how he's being referred to in every outlet. So I'm going to show you quickly. Let me give you a picture of Jack and Lilly. That's a blurry one. But that is little Lilly on the left, 6 years old, and Jack on the right, who is 4. And we are going to be talking about their disappearance from this home in Nova Scotia. Okay. And then if you're in the chats, it'd be interesting. We did a show not too long ago. And this, not in every way, but in a few ways, this case reminds me a lot of a case that we covered a few weeks ago. And I want to see if you maybe can figure that out, or if it feels the same way to you. So Daniel Robert Martell, so he goes by Daniel Martell. He calls himself the stepfather of the children. And he said to a newspaper there locally earlier this month that he and the children's mom, her name is Malaya Brooks Murray, okay, last heard Jack and Lilly on the morning of May 2nd. And at that time, they were laying, bless you, Daniel and Malaya were laying in the bedroom with their 16-month-old baby. Okay, so Jack and Lilly are Malaya's biological children. Daniel's their stepdad. But together, Malaya and Daniel have a 16-month-old baby girl named Meadow. Okay, so Daniel's account is that he and Malaya are in the bedroom with the baby, kind of dozing in and out of sleep. And he says that the sun was already up, that Lilly popped into the bedroom. He said that she had a pink shirt on. He said, we could hear Jackie in the kitchen. A few minutes later, we didn't hear them, so I went out to check. The sliding door was closed and their boots were gone. Okay, so, sometimes I say put that in that little box in your head and tuck it away till later. Put that sliding door in there. So he surmised that the children slipped outside through the sliding door. He said when they noticed the 2 children were missing on May 2nd, he immediately jumped in the car and searched neighboring roads looking in culverts. Okay. By the time he returned home, the RCMP were already there, having been called by the children's mother. So some sources do want to clarify that he didn't say car. He says he hopped in a vehicle. So that could mean like a 4-wheeler, an ATV type vehicle, in that sense, that he hopped in just to go around. So when you hear him expound on that a little bit, he talks about going into like I said, the neighboring yards, neighboring acreage. But it does specify that he said he was looking in these culverts, which I thought was a little bit of an interesting thought for a 4 and 6-year-old, right? Like,
yeah. Which, I mean, check everywhere you can, but
And we don't know. He didn't specify either. That could mean like maybe they like to play in drainage pipes, right? Or things like that. So he's just checking to see. But you want to take all these little things and think about what they say. So that's kind of his account of that morning on May 2nd. But here's the deal. We don't really get him telling those details until to the RCMP until like a day or two later. So it takes a little bit of time for some of these details to come out. And sometimes these stories aren't all consistent. All right. So again, we're just going to talk about a little bit about how this goes in kind of this timeline of events here. So that was on May 2nd when they called RCMP to come there, but he was already out of the home, right? Daniel was already out running around looking for the kiddos. And at the time, Malaya called and called RCMP. So this would be a statement from those investigators there. And they said, this was early on, right when this happened. The search for missing children, Lilly and Jack Sullivan, is ongoing in Pictou County since just after 10 a.m. this morning, May 2nd. A search has been underway for 2 children who are believed to have wandered from a home in Lansdowne Station in Pictou County. There is a multi-agency response currently on the ground in Pictou County. It includes resources from ground search and rescue, teams from around the province who are collaborating to ensure resources and teams are available on an ongoing basis. Other resources and teams include the Civil Air Search, the Rescue Association, Department of Natural Resources Air Services, several RCMP units, including the Police Dog Services, the remotely piloted aerospace systems, so that's going to be your drones, okay, and others. Additionally, the RCMP issued a vulnerable missing person alert for Pictou County. So a vulnerable missing person alert, that's going to be exactly what it sounds like, okay? That's going to be 2 children that are missing. Obviously, this would be a vulnerable population. So this is not an Amber Alert. It's not the same thing, and this has consistently been a topic of conversation early on with their mother, Malaya, and later on with others that are keeping current with this case. And the reason that they have never issued an Amber Alert for these children, and RCMP has said emphatically, is because they have not once throughout this process considered the children to have been abducted. And that's one of the criteria, or the main criteria, to then be able to issue an Amber Alert. Okay. So again, this is continuing with the statement on May 2nd, the day the children went missing. It says Pictou County District RCMP is asking for the public's assistance in locating 6-year-old Lilly Sullivan and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan. They were last seen this morning, May 2nd, on Gairloch Road in Lansdowne Station, Pictou County. Lilly Sullivan has shoulder-length light brown hair with bangs. She might be wearing a pink sweater, pink pants, and pink boots. Okay, I showed you a picture of the children a moment ago, and here is a photo of Lilly. Jack Sullivan has short blondish hair. He is wearing blue dinosaur boots. No other clothing description is available for the children. And it says that we ask that people spread the word through social media and be respectful of the family during this time. Here is a picture of Jack. Okay. Anyone with information on the whereabouts of Lilly. And it goes on to tell you to contact the Pictou County District Agency, the RCMP, and all of these phone numbers, which we will put up on the Instagram post. And as the show goes on, I will be saying those numbers quite a lot. But that was the initial statement from RCMP about the disappearance of these kiddos. Again, they early on are not expecting or suspecting an abduction took place. And that's not the first thing you're going to go to, right? Would you say? Look, and this is a very rural area. Lots of woods. So that trailer butts up. I think I have a better aerial view, maybe, that shows some woods. We're going to discuss the actual property itself here in a moment. That's a little bit of a grainy photo, but you can see what I mean in terms of the land there. What were you going to say, Brian?
No, just that. Like, actually, abductions are probably the least category when a missing person or missing persons case gets resolved. Probably say that'd be the least little sliver of the pie there.
Okay. So the least likely. Would you say particularly I guess maybe not in these ages. These might be higher ages to be abducted, but in a rural area where you're just at home with your family in that scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a numbers person, but I would almost bet you'd be hard pressed to find a case where a kid was abducted from a home in a rural area like that, like from the home itself, like where last time you see the kid is actually in the house.
Yeah,
I could be wrong, but
yeah,
because it just that a lot of that would not make sense early on.
Right. So we have on May 2nd. Let me get you. You know, I like my paper notes now. All right. So we know that on April 29th, so this would have been a Tuesday. Okay. So they kind of go back and forth. Again, keep in mind, guys, this is ongoing. It's very, very current. It's very, very hot. And I will say I have applauded the efforts of the RCMP, at least everything they've put out thus far. They've been very, very tight-lipped when it comes to the actual investigation, not wanting to compromise the case, but also very just open with the public in the sense of letting everyone know at every turn that, you know, these are the things we are doing. This is what we're following up on. And they've actually said some very specific things that I feel like we don't often hear from investigators in terms of alluding to whether or not they have the assumption that these children are still with us in terms of being alive. And we're going to get into that. But on Tuesday, April 29th, so this would have been 3 days before the children were reported missing. The bus driver did drop them off at home after school on Tuesday. Again, Jack is 4. Okay, so he may be in like a preschool situation. Some elementary schools have preschools. I also don't know. I have to remember sometimes, you know, we're dealing with Canada. So while not very different from us, there are certain aspects of day-to-day life and things that would be maybe just a tiny bit different. So I'm not certain if Jack went to school with Lily. I will say that everything kind of makes it seem that way, or at least close by. So they dropped them off at home on Tuesday. So then we have Wednesday, April 10th. So there was no school that day on Wednesday, or excuse me, April 30th. There was no school on Wednesday, April 30th, because it was a pre-planned professional development day, or like think about like a teacher work day. Mm-hmm. That day was already off for students in all of any public schools there in Nova Scotia. So then on the next day, Thursday, May 1st, we know that the kids were not at school, and Mom and Daniel cite that they had kept them home due to an illness. Sometimes they cite a cough, or they just say that they were sick, and they did not go to school on Thursday, May 1st. So then on May 2nd, Friday morning, that's the morning in question, okay? So at 10 o'clock in the morning is when we have Lily and Jack being reported missing by their mother to 911. Okay. Now we don't have that call. Okay. So it's a little different than it is here. Sometimes we can things kind of leak a little bit. Not that they don't there, but in this particular case, we're not getting that yet. And she says that they are gone. The mom's statement is they were outside playing, but we weren't aware of it at the time. And the next thing we knew, it was quiet.
They were outside playing?
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing you know, it was quiet.
Uh-huh. But so the other sentence I thought was interesting is they were outside playing, but we weren't aware of it at the time. Mm-hmm. I guess I don't know what happened then to make her aware that they were outside playing before they were then not there anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. So you with me there?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So at 11 o'clock that morning, that's when that vulnerable missing persons advisory was issued in Pictou County. So so it's Pictou County District RCMP. Okay, they're seeking public assistance in locating 6-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Jack. And this goes on to tell you what I described a minute ago, where it kind of talks about their clothing choices that morning and what they think the children would be looking like, and that Jack would be in his dinosaur boots, you know, etc. So they say that they don't know about any more clothing details, and they share this information through social media, share it with anyone you know, and they go on to explain like what numbers you can contact, kind of like I just told you, and how you can contact Crime Stoppers there locally if you want to be anonymous. So then at 4:55 p.m., there was an official update. So that's when they say the search is ongoing. And they go on to tell the public that these 2 children are believed to have wandered from a home on Gerlach Road. There is a multi-agency response. I told you what agencies were responding at that time. And so this is when they just are kind of keeping the public really notified. So they came on at 11 o'clock, an hour after they were called, and then again at 4:55 to speak to the public. So at 5:27 p.m., they have another what they call a broadcast intrusive alert. So picture one of the ones that probably kind of makes that alarm on your phone or maybe through your TV. Kind of, I would consider that very similar to an Amber Alert without that being the name of it, okay? So they have that one extending throughout like surrounding counties. And then we know that they start deploying all the ground crews and the air support. By then, it's a full-blown search mission. And they started out with the tracking dogs, okay? So the canines that initially started with Jack and Lilly were the tracking dogs. So at 6 p.m. that evening, the search team becomes more coordinated. They are able to bring in more agencies. And I will say, from the get-go, this kind of reminds me a little bit of an Asia Degree in the sense of like an immediate, huge response. Like we're going to get these kids. And, we will have some side banter here in talking about this, just some discussion because the nature of the case. But we do see cases where kiddos go missing in rural areas, or maybe a family's out hiking and you have this large initial response. And then it might be 6 hours later, but we've seen the footage. That's what keeps everybody hopeful in a situation like this, where, maybe a heat seeking or like a thermal, technology is used in a helicopter and they see that little red dot down there between the trees. And they see that, that's a person, that's a kid that's alive, and they rescue them. And we've seen these happen over the years. So that's kind of exactly the take that they went with initially, right when this happened. So they go on and brief the family some more. And then by the end of the day on that Friday, evidently at this time, they say that tension escalated between family members following the disappearance of the children. So what we have, I don't like saying anything that's potentially just rumor. And there is a lot of that right now because of it being an ongoing investigation. So we don't have a whole lot of facts. But I'll tell you what, we do have information straight from the horse's mouth, and that would be Daniel's, because he is all over social media, news outlets, taking interviews, talking to police, answering questions. And so, again, he is the stepfather of Lily and Jack. So he will sometimes either corroborate or not some of these things that the public has gotten wind of. So one thing that we have heard, though, pretty consistently is that there was some sort of an argument or frustration between the families. And when they say between the families, what they mean is on the property that they all lived. So Daniel, Malaya, the children all lived in that trailer. I just showed you this one here. Well, I'm going to go on and show you a little bit more of the property here. So if you're looking at this photo, if you are listening to an audio podcast here, guys, I've got to put these pictures up on the Andrea Uplate Instagram page, so you'll be able to see these there. But there's quite a few, there's debris here. Okay. I think that there's no doubt about that. The condition of their trailer certainly looks, at least from the outside standards, pretty dilapidated. It's in pretty bad shape. We've got, a kind of a slide, another little outbuilding, somewhat of a makeshift fence here. Again, this butts up to the woods. The roof's not in great shape. That I'm painting a picture here because you kind of got to see what we're dealing with before we then also determine how hands-on and really on top of everything everybody was. And I say that again, we discussed this, I'll go on and say in the Summer Wells case, because that's the case that I sadly am reminded of so much with the case of Jack and Lilly here. But being without funds, right? Like having a lower financial status does not mean that you are not a good parent or that you are neglectful. Absolutely not. But when we start looking, for instance, in Summer Wells, we looked at the inside conditions of the home. The child was living under a hole in the basement. We then started seeing things were certainly, at the very, very least neglectful. So in no way does financial status determine the type of parent you are by any means. And that's not the aim here when we discuss the condition of this trailer, but it does go on because we're going to get into talking about CPS here in a moment, Child Protective Services. So there's a reason that their baby is no longer with them since the search has been taking place for Jack and Lilly. Okay. So that's what we're getting at here. But when you look at this photo, one thing it doesn't show is another makeshift trailer on the property. And that is where Daniel, the children's stepfather, that's where his mother and or possibly brother also live. And so most sources will cite this entire property to be that of his mother, that she owned it. And the evening of and the day after the children went missing, that their tensions arose between her, Daniel's mother, and Malaya's family, the children's mother's family. And I think that from what it sounds like, Malaya's mother and her family were accusing Daniel of having something to do with the children's disappearance or having done something to the children. And tensions rose, arguments broke out, and she packed up, meaning mom, Malaya, and left her home, left the home that she shared with Daniel and that she had her children at, where her children went missing from. Now, a lot of folks, look at this unfavorably because they say, look, you're the mom, you've got this baby, like stay there, forget tensions with like, let's say potential mother-in-law or boyfriend's mom, and, put your head down, do your thing and wait for your children because the natural instinct, I do think, is to stay where you are if your children go somewhere. Mm-hmm. Also, thank God, I've never been in the position of having a child go missing. So I don't know. People do act in ways that maybe we don't understand during times of tension and duress. So just letting you know, the facts are that she did move, though. She did leave the day after. So on May 3rd, the kids go missing and Malaya leaves. There are differing accounts exactly of where she went, but most sources kind of come back to that she's with family, she's with her mother, or just with some of her extended family during this time. But that's exactly what happens, and then she's gone. So Daniel himself says that there was an argument in the yard that day. He said, my mother had to kick some people off the property because they were accusing me of being involved. When I'm the only one still fighting for them, it's sad.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a lot, right? What are you thinking?
Well, I was just writing down the division between the two parties within, meaning the mother or the mother and the husband or whatever. Why, I don't know. Like why they have such stress.
Well, and
early on,
the way he describes it is it not necessarily that they were in the fight or that he and the two of them had the fight. That it was like her family and his family, right? Mm-hmm. Like the Hatfields and McCoys. Her family's accusing him of being involved. His mom's getting pissed that they're saying that. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of how he paints it to be. Mm-hmm. So he even says, like, his words are, my mother had to kick some people off the property. Now, in saying that, I think he is referring to Malaya's family, but either way, we do know that she left. So on the next day, on May 3rd, 2025, this would be at 7:57 in the morning, the RCMP puts out a statement saying, while it is tempting to help by searching, it is strongly discouraged because it contaminates the search area with scent and broken branches and debris. There are search dogs following scent, drones above looking for heat signatures. See, that's what we were just speaking on. And every person who enters the space will send responding GSAR members to you and not to the missing persons. So searching is very methodical based on science and math and done in specific patterns. Please do not enter the search area. If you live near and check your own sheds, that is very different from entering the woods in known search environments. And I'll tell you, I really, really like that. We know that. We know that that's factual. We know that that's very important. And I think that that's what I meant when I said that the RCMP has always been just very, very clear with the public and open and talking to them while keeping their investigative practices, tight-lipped and keeping that close to not compromise anything. And I love how they explain that. The guy who got on, I watched that clip and he's very patient with everyone. He's like, look, it's math and science. You're going to mess it up. But definitely, hey, look in your sheds, your outbuildings. Please help us with anything that you know about. So at 4:00 that afternoon, there was another like emergency alert for surrounding counties that was list or sent out. And you guys, this is a little dry at the beginning just because we're going through the first few hours of the disappearance of the children. But we're going to get a little bit more into family dynamics, a little bit more into the he said, she said, meaning between Daniel and Malaya here in just a moment. But this kind of sets the scene as to what it looked like in the immediate hours and days following their disappearance. So they just go on to kind of say the same statement over and over again. Really, there's not much else you can say. There wasn't new news, new evidence, or developments. So they just continue to pump out what the kids look like, what size they are, their height, their clothing, and these kinds of things. And so we know that the search area expands to about 4 square kilometers at that time. So around this time, Malaya and Daniel, this is the next day on the 3rd, okay, attended a briefing at the search and rescue headquarters on Lansdowne Station Road. So according to Daniel Martell, Malaya, mom, the kid's mom, right, leaves in the middle of the briefing and was sitting in the back of an ambulance. She then left that area with her mom, and Daniel says that he has not seen or heard from her since, and he said that she cut off all contact with him following this. So to reiterate, they are in a briefing the day after the children go missing. She leaves the briefing, goes to the back of an ambulance. With that, I get that. I mean, you probably couldn't get me out of an ambulance if something like that happened. But goes to the back of the ambulance, leaves with her mom, and blocks him. She blocks him on social media. She blocks his phone number. She's not getting his calls or texts. And they have not, per Daniel, we don't have their phone records, right? I think we can assume that the RCMP does. They probably know exactly what communication was or was not happening at this time. But per Daniel, she blocked him and they have not spoken since. We're talking to this day. We're into June 3rd. So it's been a full month since he has spoken to her. And that's how long these children have been missing. So that night, the RCMP at 6:59 p.m. puts out a whole new statement, essentially just reiterating all of the same things again. They say they're using a variety of tools and resources as they look for the children in the heavily wooded area. Anyone with information who haven't already spoken to police, please contact the Pictou County District RCMP. So they go on to say again that they don't feel like the children were abducted. They do think they wandered off. And, now they're just kind of fighting the elements, the terrain, the potential for animal attacks, XYZ. We talk about these kinds of things often, and the options are kind of endless there. So then on May 4th of 2025, Daniel Martell shared an account with news outlets talking about their disappearance. So now this is May 4th. Okay, so 2 days after they were reported missing. And Daniel gets on the news. Again, if you want to see Daniel, just hop on YouTube, Google, wherever. He's everywhere. And he says that in the early morning hours, Lily came into the room multiple times while Jack was probably playing in the kitchen. Shortly after, he believes the children quietly opened the back sliding door and went outside. Their boots were found beside the door. He says that he assumes probably just moments later, they went on and exited the back fence and left the property. Okay. He says once he realized they were gone, he immediately got in his car. So here he says car, and searched nearby dirt roads, culverts, rivers, and streams. Per his account, he was in thigh-high water, trudging through rivers. Okay. So later on that afternoon, there was an update, and the search is continuing through Sunday in Lansdowne. They say there's approximately 130 searchers during the day, dozens more support staff. It was a large-scale effort that continuously actually just got larger in those first few days. And so they talk about the different roles. Again, this is a statement from RCMP. I'm kind of summarizing here, so I'm not reading you the same thing over and over again. But they're doing a heavy urban search and rescue from Halifax. These canines are there. We've got Canadian Mounties. The Nova Scotia canines were there as well. 10 different search teams on the ground that day, and 12 search teams planned for that night through 8 o'clock the next morning. So there was no lacking of resources and of effort there. So Daniel, on May 5th, was interviewed by the RCMP for many hours. RCMP state there's no evidence of foul play or abduction at this time. 3 days later, okay?
Mm-hmm.
This is what they're saying at that time, 72 hours after the disappearance. An Amber Alert is not issued. Again, it's a vulnerable person's alert. And they say there is no evidence of an abduction. This one investigator spoke and she said they are believed to have wandered. She added they are not believed to be with an adult at this time. It's going to be a multi-agency response, and there are a variety of resources going out. So that's what she says. This investigator says first. And so they finally see the first little potential hit. Okay, like the first something. And this is 3 days later. It's the report of a child's boot print found near the Sullivan residence, their home, that leads the search crews to concentrate efforts in that area. Now, we have differing accounts, right? So we have what Daniel says earlier that I just read you, which says their boots were found beside the door.
Yeah.
I don't know how many pairs of boots they have, but their boots were found beside the door. We have another one where when police gave their description of what people should look for when looking for Jack and Lilly, they say Jack had on his dinosaur boots and Lilly probably had on pink boots. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we don't know. These are not answers that any of us can know right now because it is ongoing and you cannot find this information. But that little boot print, we've not got information whether or not it is any kind of match, whether or not it has anything to do with their disappearance, but it is something, it's kind of the only thing they were able to hang on to for quite some time. So other items that they found during the search included a child's clothing and a water bottle, but Daniel says these items don't belong to Lilly or Jack. So then people start questioning, where did these children's clothing and water bottle come from? Now, I think we can assume, would you agree with me, Brian, that the RCMP is very likely testing for DNA and that clothing and that water bottle, regardless of if he says it's theirs or not. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I would assume so.
And again, we're not going to have those answers, guys. It's just not going to be time for that yet. So the children's family at that point evidently was asking them to expand their search because they continued to suggest a possible abduction. What does this sound like? Which case? Do you remember?
Yeah.
You may not remember her name, but...
Well, Summer Wells.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you see patterns like that happen in cases time and time again. Or certain phrases people say. One of them is, that's when shots rang out. Mm-hmm. Anytime somebody says that, doing like a shooting investigation, whatever, that's a running joke because we all know like that's almost always when someone's BSing.
Okay.
Right? So the reason I say it's like these patterns you see at times. Rural area, kids missing, and the immediate jump is to abduction, which is strange to me because the first thing I would think as a parent, as a regular citizen, as someone who lives in that area, is that the kids are probably somewhere in the woods because it's remote. You know who's driving up and down your gravel driveway. Mm-hmm. Now, if you've got some people that were staying on that property that you had to kick off the property for any reason, like was said earlier, I have no idea who that person is or persons, but if there's any kind of conflict with someone who was staying on that property or visiting that property that has like ill intent or maybe got other family members, concerned that, hey, I don't want that person around my kids, then yeah, maybe. But I don't think that will cause a division that sounds like they already had either prior to the day of the event or shortly after. I would find it hard for a couple during that situation where two kids are missing to completely turn on one another and divide if they had no other problems or no other stressors prior to that.
Yeah, and obviously speculation runs wild here because, or like here, there's a few different options, right? It could be that they were already having trouble. Maybe they were already effectively split prior to this happening, and that was it. Maybe they weren't, but we know that couples can turn on each other, point the finger at each other, and blame. Usually that's not within hours, though, to the point that mom's leaving and they're going to be living in separate residences. So who's really to say when it comes to that? But I do think it's interesting. We have our buddy listener in the chats, Bosco, who said what has him keyed up is that the stepdad is being at the forefront. This can be a couple of things that can make mom's silence, because listen, she's not only blocking dad and not talking to him, she ain't talking to anybody. Like, she's not talking to press. She's not begging for someone. Lily, when she runs, she kind of likes to swing her right arm and skip a little bit. Or, if you find somewhere that has cows, please look around, because Jack can't go anywhere without stopping and looking at the cows. Like, the things that as a mom you're going to want to impose upon strangers about your children, to do anything to help them find them if they happen to look around and see these kids anywhere, right? So mom has been very quiet. Some sources have said that mom said that police told her to separate from Daniel and to stay quiet. I've read some places where people say maybe a lawyer told you that, but that doesn't sound like something police would generally say in this circumstance. Would you find that to be something that's not been corroborated, by the way? That's that's just kind of what's the fodder right now.
Yeah, usually you don't get involved in telling people, don't talk to this person, don't do this, don't do that.
Especially in this situation. Just where it's just missing children. Day 1, 2, 3.
And every bit of it is, you're trying to find kids, and then sadly, if it's going to be bad and we find that they were not just missing or wandered off, and then something bad happened in the woods. Now we're dealing with crime scenes. Now we're dealing with all this activity and how people have been interacting, how their phone activity has been going on. So you don't want, it's almost like a science experiment. You don't want to interject something that can mess that up, or start to make someone inadvertently think their partner or spouse or whatever is guilty of some type of crime. You let them interact however they're going to interact without getting too deep in other investigations. But that's normally how you do, especially with missing persons, when early on like that, and they may already have information that leads them to a certain area that's not abduction, that is them wandering off. You let me know when I can say something else about the briefing earlier.
Yes, I'm trying to think of what.
I was just going to say that I wonder if there was something said very specifically in that briefing that caused her to get up and go.
Exactly.
And a perfect example is like when you're talking to someone and you say, you do understand that surveillance cameras are at the gas station or at the hotel, red light cameras are working. You do understand that we can track cell phone. You understand all that, and you see people's reactions change when they go, "Oh,
precisely."
I've been lying." So I don't know. I wonder if something was, and I'm not saying she's guilty of lying. It's interesting. There's always like a catalyst. Yeah, there's always something, a stressor.
And so just quickly to Bosco's point, and he said that, and you and I have talked about this, but sometimes, like stepdad, he is in the forefront, right? He is. So on one hand, that can make mom look suspicious. I think that a lot of people have felt that way because they think, why isn't she talking? It's making her silence feel larger and louder, because he seems willing, right, and able, and I'm going to let me provide. And he even says, but I think that's kind of part of it too, that he will say out loud, like, I'm the one keeping this alive. I'm the one out here helping. So that could be showing friction between them. That could be, I'm not sure exactly what he's alluding to there. But Bosco also made the point that maybe, he could have a different kind of guilt, and he could maybe know things and is trying to protect mom. And they decided amongst the two of them that it's best if mom goes quiet and goes away. because maybe she wasn't faring so well in front of the cameras. All of this is speculatory, guys, which is something we don't love doing on this show. But like this, in this early of an investigation, I mean, there's only so much that you can go off of. And so, these are the things that everyone is working through to try to figure out as the investigation goes on, what this might look like. So there's that. So let's move it on. We're on to May 7th. At this time, we have, let's see here. Back on the 6th, really quick, we know that Malaya had been staying with her mom in a nearby town since they went missing, right? Since the next day. So on May 7th, it's been 5 days since the disappearance at this point, or since they've been reported missing. Officers come back to the home and they ask Daniel to turn over his phone. All right. Mm-hmm. So he states that he complied. He states that he handed it over willingly. But when reporters asked about the investigation, this is the maternal grandmother, Malaya's mother. She responded, "We're not discussing anything right now. The police told us not to." So Malaya's mother is the one that's pretty consistent saying, well, we're not talking and it's because they told us not to. Okay. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's part of their way of doing things. I don't know. They're clearly not telling Daniel not to. So at 2:11 p.m. there on May 7th, there was an announcement that they are going to be scaling back the ground search operations. This is when they cited extensive coverage of the terrain, but a lack of confirmed sightings. So this would be on the afternoon, 5 days after the kids went missing. There was a large scale announcement saying that they are pulling it back. They're pulling back the search, if you will. So for about over those 6 days, next, there were more than 160 trained volunteers that participated every single day in that effort, that large scale effort that covered about 4 square kilometers. There's a little bit of different assessment of the ground covered there, but it was a lot. It was dense forest. Again, they used helicopters, drones, infrared imaging, police dogs, but there was no confirmed sightings of the missing children. And I think that's a big deal. Because if we are talking about children that are alive or children that sadly have wandered off but passed to either, the conditions, the weather, or an animal attack or a drowning, anything like this, the kind of search that they gave, I mean, nothing's 100%, but it's a pretty likely thought, I think, that there's 2 of them as well, guys. It's not just one. So it's a pretty likely thought that at least one of them at this point could have been found in that situation. And so that does start making you wonder if maybe either they met a very, very, intentional, unfortunate end and have been disposed of in some way, or was there an abduction? Was there, we talked about Summer Wells. Was actually there something else? Was there an arrangement? Was there, there's all kinds of things that you can think of. But, it does start sounding more and more likely that they somehow got potentially in a vehicle and got away, or have been dealt with, so to speak. So the investigation does continue. Again, fewer searchers were deployed by this time. But they're still saying, this was on May 7th, and they were still saying at the time that there was no indication of foul play or abduction. And they believe that Lily and Jack wandered away from the home. Again, they're still not issuing the Amber Alert for that reason. But they are, I say that because people kind of are getting caught up on that in various reports that you read. It doesn't really, they're still sending out constant, broadcasts about population, vulnerable warning, whatever that one was called that they use. And it was still a very open and active case. And so then we have a couple more statements that were put out, but here's what we're going to talk about now. Did I leave you hanging on something? Did I feel like you were about to say something? Or am I making that up?
It was, I said that at the briefing. We covered it.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So then let's see here. We know that plainclothes investigators come back, speak with Daniel again. He said that they are seeking to analyze any more technology that he could have that might help identify any phones that entered the property. So would that be like a geofencing type situation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So guys, that's kind of like and I don't know the technology well, but essentially to me, I look at it as the opposite of your phone pinging. It's not where your phone was, it's what phones were in that area. And so it can kind of ping off of whatever technology entered a certain area. Okay. And so now Daniel will say that he was asked to provide a polygraph and that he complied. Investigators, when asked about this, I think it differs. Different sources will say that they do say that he was asked to take a polygraph. Some won't, just are tight-lipped about it regardless. And they certainly don't hand over his results. But he says that he did take one, and he says his words are, let's see what he said exactly. I believe his words were something along the lines of, but I did take one. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say the results, but it did go toward helping my case or something like that. He's alluding to the fact that he passed the polygraph. That's neither here nor there, just something to keep in mind. And so when we look at CPS involvement, I told you we're going to talk a little bit about that. So that is Children Protective Services. I do believe it is considered still CPS there, depending on where you live in your region. It can be a plethora of acronyms, but essentially that's what it's there for, the welfare of the children. So a lot of people speculate or talk about mom taking Meadow, the 16-month-old child that she shares with Daniel, and moving out the day after the older kids disappeared to live with her mom. However, there's also kind of a rumor mill about CPS. So there are people on certain threads that get frustrated about this, saying that that's a lie. Maybe it is, but I'm not sure why Daniel would say it, because it doesn't really paint him in a very good light. But according to Daniel, he says that he had a friend drive him to the Children's Protective Services office in Stellarton. And here he requested to see his daughter, Meadow, his 16-month-old daughter, Meadow. And he, per himself, says that his request was denied. And his statement says, quote, "As of now, I can't be around Meadow. With the kids going missing, Children's Protective Services wants to keep a tight leash on everything." Mm-hmm. At least in the United States. If you live in Canada and you know this to be a different story, please let us know. But at least here, that's not, a child would never be taken from your home because of these circumstances. Simply because, not simply, but you know what I'm saying? Like, because the only other thing going on is that your other two children are missing. If your home is in order, if there isn't, there aren't illicit materials there isn't a question of safety, there isn't a question of harm or neglect or any of these things, your child doesn't get taken. But he paints it in the light of, it's pretty normal, in the light of them going missing. They want to keep, who else said this? Summer Wells' parents said it, because her three brothers were taken into DCS custody immediately upon the investigation into Summer's disappearance. And Summer's dad, Don, look, and I'm not trying to paint Malaya and Daniel like Candace and Don Wells. And I hope to goodness we never have to consider them equals, because, I put Candace and Don in some of the lower than the low, when, in some of the investigations we've looked at in terms of how their children were treated. And it was disgusting. But so I'm not painting these two to necessarily be the same there, but I'm just saying there are similarities in this case. And that's what Don Wells said too. He said that his three children were taken just due to the investigation. And that's just really not how this goes, guys. That's not what goes on. Now, other thoughts were that maybe he did go, maybe that Malaya, Meadow's mother, had said, you can't see her. They say you can't see her, and maybe that's where he went to try to get permission. But maybe mom still has custody of her. We don't know. I have read other reports, though, a few different times that kind of consistently said that it was due to the condition of the home. And some reports will allude to drugs being found in the home. I kind of hate, I'm going to throw it out there because that's kind of all we've got right now. But I will stress that that's not corroborated about drugs in the home. But certainly I have read about the safety of the home. And that could include drugs, or it could just mean structurally the baby can't be in the home.
In reference to drugs or like woeful neglect kind of thing, I did make a note when you mentioned earlier from the stepdad saying heard the sliding glass door.
Mm-hmm.
But then when he realized whatever, they were not in the home, he got in the car and then just started driving around checking places. If I could be wrong, because I mean we're talking about it in a short time span, but if he's saying that, the initial reaction usually is a 4 and 6 year old. If you hear a sliding glass door and you think they've gone outside, you're staying on foot and you're looking, you're calling them, you're checking the surrounding area because they can only run but so fast, especially once they hit a wooded area. But if you got to catch up on time, if you realize I have not seen my 4 or 6 year old in the last hour or 2 hours, or the last thing I remember before I was nodding off, I'm not saying he was on the nod. I'm saying in the past, people that, are using certain drugs, the last thing maybe he remembers is something about a sliding glass door or whatever. Now you got 2 or 3 hours that you're trying to catch up. You're in a panic. You're in a car driving around. If in fact that's what he did, if that's what he's saying he did, he could be lying about all of it or could be 100% honest about it.
Yeah.
And that he just jumped in a car, panicked, and started driving around. Okay. But those are the things like you and I talk about all the time, like the little red flags that go, that
kind of doesn't feel like something you would, in a normal circumstance.
Yeah.
That's not something you would do. Agreed. Yeah. They're 4 and 6. These are small children, guys. Let's see here. I'm going to get back to, let's see. Little bitty kiddos. Okay. They're not getting, kids can go far on foot. I don't mean that. Mm-hmm. But if you legitimately thought that they just went out the sliding glass door, you're going to get out and you're going to catch them. You're going to find them.
You can also hear brush breaking, leaves crunching, that sort of thing at a pretty good distance, and you live there, you know that. I mean, like I'm saying, the people that live there.
Well, we can see too that it's the terrain. We just looked at that, right? It's all woods. It's all, for goodness sakes, the kids are running an obstacle course to get out of here.
Yeah.
We have trash, debris, wood piles. I wish I could zoom in. I don't know if you guys can see. They probably can't see that, right? You guys can't see that little arrow. There looks to be what seems to be like a, this is a very terrible photo to reflect this, but what looks to be like a burn barrel, there in the backyard. But, I don't know. Yeah, to get in a car and drive off would not typically be the thing that you would do. That's where a lot of this doesn't make sense, because then I guess also mom saying, this is what got me initially too, and not to pit mom against dad. I mean, either one or neither, but that she's saying she called 911 immediately. Mm-hmm. We talked about this with Summer Wells because her mom says the same thing, and I think sometimes people who maybe have been a bit more on the neglectful side do insert things that, even if they're innocent here, makes them sound more suspect, because it's not the normal thing that someone would do, but they're trying to make themselves seem more present as a parent. So like, if this is what a present parent would do, so this is what I'm going to say I did, even if you didn't do the bad thing. Mm-hmm. And I think for her to say, oh, I called 911 immediately, you're really not going to do that. If it's the situation like you say, like if the picture that you've painted is what happens, that you were laying in the bed with the baby, that you and dad are kind of falling asleep, the baby's laying there, you want the kids to kind of be quiet, you think Jack might be in the kitchen, you think maybe they had been outside playing, and you go to look for him and don't see him, you don't scream to 911, you run outside and call their names, you're looking around, so I just thought that was always kind of interesting when she said that too. That was kind of my first little bit of a flag of the immediate 911 call, at least the way that she describes it. But then we have other sources where when they talk about it, they say that the last time they saw the children was probably around 8 o'clock that morning. So 911 was called at 10 o'clock. So then she says, we think they were outside playing, and then it got quiet, and then we realized they weren't there. But like, you don't know that they were outside. So there's just a lot of like, I don't know, things that aren't making a lot of sense. So on May 9th, so this would be 7 days, right? It's been a week at this point since the kiddos went missing. Daniel says that he has been fully cooperative with investigators. He says, I gave them everything from my phone. I asked for a lie detector test. I asked for drug tests. I'm the one trying to move this forward. I'm giving him information that I have. He says the RCMP are examining their wireless router at that point, see who got maybe potentially connected to their internet and when.
Mm-hmm.
We have, again, at that same day, the large RCMP truck was in the area. Daniel said that they searched Lansdowne Lane from the air by a helicopter and also conducted in-water search, but nothing was found. So keep in mind, we talked about rivers, streams, these kinds of things. Very early on, they had divers out. They're dredging, they're diving. They were searching these bodies of water for these children early on, and nothing had been found. At this point, this week later, still the only thing that we have is that potential boot print of one of the kids, but we really don't even know yet if that's what that was or not. So then on May 13th, RCMP issued an update. So at 12:24 p.m., the Pictou County District RCMP, with another major crime unit, went on to say, we are exploring all avenues in this missing persons investigation. This would be Staff Sergeant Curtis McKinnon. So he says, we have officers from multiple disciplines dedicated to finding Lily and Jack, including highly trained RCMP major crime and forensic investigators. Again, this is a very different district. It's a different area, different country. But in your experience, and maybe the answer is yes, I just don't know, is a major crimes unit, or what they're considering a major crimes unit, going to be conducting and investigating the disappearance? If, again, they're still saying they don't at that time consider it to be abduction or foul play, is this what you would, generally the service you would utilize?
I mean, it depends.
Okay.
Just because of the catchphrase, like if it's a major crimes unit or that sort of thing.
Okay.
I think that if they put that information out there, they're pretty thorough at what they do. If they put that information out there, I mean, how did you word it again? That this is not, that they feel comfortable that this is not a.
That was early. Yeah, I mean, within 3 or 4 days, they were still saying that they didn't suspect foul play. I mean,
or an abduction.
Or an abduction. That's the one thing they were fairly consistent with this whole time.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times law enforcement will put that out so that people are not on a, panicking and thinking, oh my gosh, my kid's going to get kidnapped.
Right.
Just meaning like, okay, we're not looking at that. And still working their investigation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No. I was just going to say that it sounds like and seems like, you've got some of the best in Canada on that investigation, I would assume.
Yeah. So on May 16th, we're moving right along. Ground and air search efforts were planned for May 17th, right? For the next day, into the disappearance of Lily and Jack. This would have been another statement from the RCMP. Again, they just list the multiple agencies they have on this and the multiple agencies that were going to come out that next day. So on May 8th and 9th, that's when the more extensive bodies of water searches were conducted. And then we've moved forward to planning this newer search on May 17th. They talk about wanting to scale back. Do you remember I told you that a little bit earlier on, into a more specific search? So while they had been elevating, it was a heightened awareness, it was heightened area, right? They were checking out quite a wide range of acreage there. Whatever I said, 4 kilometers by 4 kilometers, a big area. They've decided to scale it back and look in very specific places. And I feel like that is interesting wording. I think that tells you a little bit. I feel like without them letting us know what they're onto or what they're thinking, it sounds like they've got some ideas in mind. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So on May 8th and 9th, I told you, was the underwater recovery team. But Warden Robert Parker says that resuming the search of the 2 children who went missing on May 2nd is giving the community hope as they also look to find answers about what exactly took place. So on that May 17th, At 7:14 p.m., they put out an update talking about that search effort. It was kind of the same in the sense of ground and air. They had more than 100 volunteer searchers out there. They name all of the various counties around that came out to help out. Civil Air Search, Rescue Association, etc. So they were really more concentrating on specific areas around Gairloch Road. Okay, that's where the children's home was located. So again, they go on just to tell you exactly who all was in the search and how it's following, of course, the May 2nd disappearance of these children. And they go on and resume it through May 18th. They again go and explain to the public, urge them not to get mixed up in this search. They don't want search volunteers. They want trained people really only. Again, I applaud that. So on May 18th, they did resume that search. And there was an update that evening around 5:56 p.m. And essentially there's not much to say. I mean, they're just letting the public know that they're continuing. This is very, very active. They are still present and trying, but there really isn't anything new, sadly, at that time. Okay. So then May 25th. So this is a whole nother week. I mean, we're getting almost up to current day now. Okay. There was an update on May 25th at 7:05 in the morning that says over the past 3 weeks, several agencies have participated in ground and air searches in Lansdowne Station as part of the ongoing investigation into the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan. The Nova Scotia RCMP thanks the hundreds of volunteers. They go on to list the agencies, and they say anyone with information who hasn't yet spoken to officers is asked to call the Picton County RC, all them same people again. And they now come to the public on May 28th to appeal for additional video footage. Okay. So finally on May 28th, it's been 26 days since their disappearance. Investigators collected hours of video from the area surrounding Lansdowne Station. They say, based on the details we've gathered so far, we have confirmed that Lily and Jack were observed in public with family members on the afternoon of May 1st. This is said by Corporal Sandy Matheru. She's one of the RCMP Major Crime Unit officers. So listen to me. This was May 28th. After collecting, they had gone around and asked neighbors and anyone local to right around where Jack and Lily lived to please collect all of your trail cams. You're going to have a lot more trail cams in that area than you have Ring doorbell cams. Okay, guys? But if people have dash cams, trail cams, anything that could have collected footage, even if nothing made you bat an eye, if you think you didn't catch anything worthwhile, please, and still to this day, actually, I would still urge you, like if you have any kind of camera footage and you live in the area, just turn it over. That's what they're still asking for. But on May 28th, after collecting all that footage, they announced to the public, we realize now that the last confirmed sighting of these children was May 1st. Now, before that, they had asked for footage starting back on April 28th, because I don't think it's a stretch for them to think that, or to suspect that they were thinking, okay, we got the call on May 2nd that they were missing, but they had not been in school that day. They were not in school the day before. The day before that was a professional work day, so no one was in school. So they're kind of butting it back to where, like, these adults weren't seeing children at school. Let's get footage from, the last time we know that they were, like, in school or seen around town. And when they do that, they realize actually on May 1st, Thursday, the day before they went missing, they were seen with family. So that's become a bit of speculation for people to say, well, why isn't that something, that was offered up? Maybe it was, and we don't know it. Maybe Daniel said, yeah, on, that Thursday, May 1st, we all went to CVS to get cough medicine for Lily or whatever, maybe. But that was not brought to the public's attention until they collected all that video footage. It certainly at least seemed, if nothing else, that's when they corroborated that. If not, that's the first time they learned of it. Now, RCMP does not specify what family members they are referring to when they say the children were seen with family members on May 1st. Mm-hmm. Now, if you ask Daniel, he will say it was them. It was their family. It was himself, Malaya, Lily, Jack, and baby Meadow. Okay. But that's, again, not been corroborated by officers in the investigation. Alrighty. So, are you still good?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I just, every now and then when I get a breath, I check in to see if there's
I just don't want to interrupt. I have a chance.
Well, on
I
this
interrupt,
one, you kind of can, because I'm not,
okay.
It's not keeping my brain as packed as some of those other ones we do. So it says, we are asking now anyone who has dash cam footage or video along Gairloch Road, listen to this, you guys, between 12 p.m., on April 28th and 12 p.m. on May 2nd to contact us. So they are still, so that came after telling the public that they saw them with family members so they know that Jack and Lily were alive and well on May 1st. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I take that back. I hope so, but they didn't say that. They did say that they saw them with family. Mm-hmm. Okay. So they want footage now from still, what is that, 28, so 29, 30, I got to do my little math here. So still they want footage from 3 days prior to their disappearance until the day of their disappearance at noon. Because remember, they say they last saw the kids at 8, they called at 10 a.m., and they want footage until noon. And I would suspect that would be just to cover all bases in case anybody's anywhere, walking, riding a vehicle, anything, in some of that overlapping of time. Would you quickly want to speculate maybe on why they would want footage all the way back to April 28th when we know that they say they saw them on May 1st with family?
Yeah. I think that, well, probably if I tell you I did something on a certain day and you have no way of proving that, and then you start to look at, okay, how am I going to prove it? I'm pulling this video. But then you realize there may have been some stuff going on just 2 days, 3 days prior to that. Or some people, their statements are conflicting, like way off on their timeline. But I mean, the thing with pulling video like that, and especially missing persons, is absolutely amazing that we have the technology. And a buddy of mine were working a missing person one time. And if I remember right, the kid was 15, 16-ish, somewhere around there. High functioning on the autism spectrum. Went, like, he could walk to the store on his own, kind of thing, fully verbal. But there was this thing that he came up missing. The family was upset. Obviously, everybody's upset. They're worried. And you block all that out, and you just have to figure out the timeline. But we started figuring out what locations he actually would recognize, no matter how he got there. What buildings would he recognize? What appointments does he go to on a regular basis? That sort of thing. And then we started pulling cameras on any of those routes. Then we sat there and watched camera footage until we saw him, because we knew exactly what he was wearing that day. And we saw him walking. We had gas station camera footage, and it's recording out in the parking lot. So you're looking at the parking lot and then across like 3 or 4 lanes of traffic. And on the opposite side of the road, you can see a figure walking. And it's like, you got to be kidding me. That is the shirt. If I remember right, it was like a Mickey Mouse type shirt. It had a very distinct design. But then we were able to figure out, okay, we know where he's heading. And I think he had been there for some Boy Scout events. But pulling video like that sometimes is...
No, I know why they're pulling it. But 3 days prior to the last time they said they saw him with family.
Yeah, but yeah. It can go either way. It can be, hey, we know you're lying, and now we've got video proof of all of this, or just pulling, trying to get that, nailing that time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not saying they're not lying. I don't know what you mean there. Because we know that they were with them on the 1st. You know what I'm saying? Unless they want to see,
because they're saying they were with them, or because
we have video footage of them with them on the 1st. So, but they're still asking for video footage of anything in and around there 3 days prior. I think a lot of speculation is because you want to see what vehicles are coming and going, what vehicles are not local there. What they even told one of the neighbors, we want to rule out local because maybe they are, in cahoots with somebody who's coming and going that would be then of interest. I think that's kind of what I'm getting at there.
I got you.
But anyway, so we've got in the chats, Michelle said, talking about both parents being in and out of sleep, how would you actually know what the kids were wearing? And Tyler in the chat says, well, we know that the backpack's gone. Here's the deal, though. You're right, guys. These are the things that everybody's saying. This is what Daniel's saying. And this is what Malaya was saying when she was speaking, right? So we have to remember that I'm not saying that they are lying, but we don't know anything yet, right? We really just know what their word is. And so Michelle made a great point a minute ago that it said, she said, why would kids who are sick, why would the parents not be up caring for them? No meds, no doctor visits, 4 adults on the property, and these 2 kids go outside, but no adults bother to go outside. Unfortunately, I think where I'll go with that is, and I'm sure Brian would attest to it as well, but, that's even something that could be true, and I say that in the sense of they could still not be complicit in any, ill will toward these children, at least in that kind of a malicious way with a death or a disappearance or something terrible that way. But look, sadly, there are all types of people on this earth, and there are people that precisely the reason social services even gets introduced to them is because of the absences that they have. And that may not even be because of abuse, and they want to keep kids home because of bruises, because that does happen. But let's just say because the parents are lazy or just not great parents, or maybe the parents are into stuff that they can't seem to wake up and get their kids to school on time. But so then, every county or area has a different kind of protocol or number, but you get a certain number of absences and a certain amount of time. DCS knocks on your door, or at least makes that phone call. Hey, where's little Johnny? Haven't seen him in a while. You know what I mean? And so sadly, they could be saying that and actually be being honest that, yeah, the kids are sick, home from school. Yeah, we're dozing in the bed with the baby. Jack knows to wake up and grab a Pop-Tart off the counter in the morning to have food. I mean, because those types of parents do exist as well. So sometimes things like that even just could be what they are, and it doesn't necessarily implicate someone. However, I do think there is more to some of this because too many things, aren't making a whole lot of sense. Let's see what we got here. We've got, sorry guys, if you are listening as an audio podcast later on, once we drop this to iTunes or Spotify, we don't usually engage with the chats quite so much during the discussion of the case, because usually we're going through a pretty strict timeline and going through a whole lot of witnesses and all these different things. This case just sadly doesn't have that. And so since it is, again, so current and so ongoing, there is so much speculation. So there are a lot of great questions in the chat. So I definitely want to get to. Fender J says, has the kids ever been seen wandering around the property or near the road by themselves before? So it's interesting, right? I grew up being outside all the time. I think Brian would say the same about himself. Now, I grew up in a more rural area than Brian did. And so I could, at a young age, go outside. Now, I'm pretty sure when I was 4 years old, I was not outside alone. But maybe with, Lily being 6 and Jack being 4, maybe, they were able to go outside on their own and just kind of stay close to the house or whatever. And play around. We don't have any neighbors or anything like that, at least that we know of, that's come to the public to say that. But what you do have is kind of differing accounts between Mom and Daniel, because in one breath they'll say, Lily and Jack knew never to go outside without one of us. Again, I hate to keep drawing these parallels, but I think about Summer Wells, because her mom says, she knew the rules. She would never XYZ. Meanwhile, you hop on TikTok to find Candace nodding off from such heavy drugs so consistently that she's got an ash on her cigarette 2 inches long. Her eyes won't open. And her kids have bruises all over them. And it's, but when she's talked to publicly about it, it's like, Summer knew all the rules. And, I'm on top of her all the time. She would never XYZ. while it may not be that abhorrent, I do feel like, sometimes we just have parents let kids do some things, but we have accounts where they say they would never go outside without the parents. But then you have where they go back and forth. Mom will say that she thinks that they were both kind of autistic. That's not really a thing. As far as we know, they don't actually, either one of the children have an autism diagnosis. She says that, but she doesn't corroborate why she feels like that would be the case for them. But then at the same time, they say, oh, we think that they got abducted because they don't know stranger danger, and they talk to everybody, which kind of goes against a very early autism diagnosis. So it's just, again, it's hard because when we do a show like this, or when we're talking about a case like this, it's so many variables. And it's again, all we can do is go off of what we know that Daniel or Malaya have said. And then we kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. We play it out the way they say it and see if that works. And a good bit of the time so far that it's not sounding great. And there could be a different explanation for it all. We'll have to we'll have to figure that out. I don't know. We'll see. But let's move it on till we get current here, which is pretty closely. So we've got, we talked to you about them requesting the dash cam footage. We know again that Lily and Jack were seen in public with family members on May 1st in the afternoon near Lansdowne Station. That is the last verified sighting that we know of at this point. But we just learned, we know that they were home that Thursday from school, Friday from school because of a cough. Now, what we don't have, right, because we can't, since it's ongoing, we don't know from the school, did the parents call the children out? Did they call and say, hey, sorry, Lily's still not feeling well. She's got a cough on that Thursday and on that Friday, or not? It would just be, sometimes parents don't call even if the kid's sick, but, it'd be a nice little piece of the puzzle to know. The ground search efforts continued through May 31st. But I want you to know that there was a time, and I can't remember if it was the May 17th or the May 20-something update. It's actually one, I think we were scrubbing the bathroom and I had it playing, and that RCMP investigators, oh, I'm sorry, I know I'm looking the wrong way. The RCMP investigator said, and he was very confident in his speech, and he was talking about scaling back the search to more specific areas. And while, like I said, they've kept the investigation very tight-lipped in the best way possible, he also said, this is not something we would be doing if we thought we'd be finding the children alive at this point. And that's not something you often will hear someone in his position say without further knowledge. Now, clearly, he very likely has further knowledge. We don't, right?
Yeah.
So that was the big, hair stand up on the, your arms. I think everybody sadly already kind of was feeling a certain kind of way about this. It's not likely that two children are going to be surviving a month in the woods alone. They haven't been found. We don't have anything. And there has been some bizarre activity at home, but she wasn't. Yeah. So, I don't know. Just take that for what it's worth, but that's definitely what one of the investigators had said. So about a month later, here we are, actually exactly a month since their mom moved away from Daniel. But on June 1st, there was another update. So that would have been just 2 days ago, guys. June 1st of 2025, there were some more search efforts underway in the Gerlach Road area. Again, that's where their home was located. Some more search and rescue organizations involving many different counties were involved. And it just says that searchers continued to focus on specific areas around Gerlach Road and the nearby pipeline. So there is a pipeline, and I think Tyler spoke to this a minute ago in the chats, because there was conflicting information on the boot print. Initially, earlier on, they were saying closer to the home, and now they're saying over here into this pipeline that a boot print had previously been located, and they wanted to come back to it. So they do say that there's a total of 8.5 square kilometers that had finally been grid searched at that point. They've given more than 10,000 hours of search time. They say it's challenging. They go on to say, I say they, meaning the town, the investigators all come on to say, like, we are Nova Scotia, like these are our children. A lot of these searchers are, while professional in nature, out conducting these searches, also have children of their own at home. And this has, gotten very personal for all of them. And it's been very difficult for all of them. So the boot print they talk about was found on the pipeline. And that's why they want to extend their efforts to continue to look down that pipeline. Again, this was on June 1st. So they say, we do know for sure it was from the children, but it's the only real thing we've had to go on thus far. Okay. And so they say at this point, the investigation remains active. So on June 2nd, yesterday at 8:30 p.m., they had a vigil. Some of you may have watched that last night. It was in Stellarton in front of the Canadian Mounted Police in Nova Scotia. The community kind of organized it to I think they said, like, quote, like the way home for Lily and Jack. And so they did balloons and lit candles and all of these kinds of things. And so even though they have scaled back the investigation, again, it is still very, very ongoing. And then we just have, you can go to multiple websites to find their, like, where they've tallied up the amount of hours, like man time, throughout these searches. I will say that at one point they transitioned from the tracking dogs. They may still be using those as well, but we know that they were also using cadaver dogs as well. So the RCMP, while they have been really diligent in keeping open with the public to the point that they can, they have said that they know that the public is desiring so many more answers, but they can't. They can't be giving it up. They don't want to compromise this location or this investigation, excuse me. I do want you to hear, though, before we start to wrap up, just because sometimes it feels nice to hear people talking. We can tell you about mom and dad, or mom and Daniel, excuse me, but without hearing their voices, sometimes it can be tough. I'm going to do kind of the opposite than what's all over social media, in the sense of I'm going to give you a small snippet of Daniel, because you can find him everywhere. And I'm going to give you like a 2-minute clip of Malaya talking. And so when she was speaking, this was, I believe, the afternoon they went missing. It could have been the morning following. It would have not been longer than that, because she hasn't spoken to the news or the public in that way since then. So let me let you go on and hear Daniel.
Very stressful. I mean, ever since the Friday morning, when we noticed that the children were gone, immediately jumped in the vehicle, surveyed all the areas, many dirt roads, many culverts as I could, and waited for the police to get there.
Okay. And then here's mom.
They happened to just get out that sliding door, and we can't hear it when it opens. And they were outside playing, but we weren't aware of it at the time. And the next thing we knew, it was quiet. And we get up, and I tell him, my partner, Daniel, I tell him, do you hear the kids? And he says, no. And we get up instantly. We're looking outside. We're looking everywhere, yelling for them. And I instantly just call 911. I just had the instinct I needed to call. They're both really go-lucky children. They're so sweet. They talk to anyone. They'll talk your ear off. They will speak to anyone in a store. Everyone. They're just extremely sweet kids. I appreciate the huge search effort going on right now. But we've been pushing for an Amber Alert, which hasn't been issued. Not just that they could possibly be abducted, which it is a possibility that they could have been, but just an alert to let everyone know that they are missing. We had people text me saying that they weren't aware someone else let them know that they were missing, and it would just be nice if everyone could be alerted. We thought maybe that we found tracks, but it's still uncertain. It's been raining and they're probably soaking wet, but with the sun today, I'm hopeful that they are feeling warm We're all filled with pain and sorrow because we just want them found. We want them home. Everyone loves them. They are definitely verbal, and they do have possible autism, but it's not extreme autism. It's just they have issues with school, and they don't catch up with the other kids. I just want to remain hopeful. But there's always, in a mother's mind, you're always thinking the worst. Last night was one of the worst nights because I didn't have them in their beds. And I don't want to go through that another night without them. They happen to just get out that sliding door and we can't hear it.
So that's Mom, and that was a snippet of Daniel. I do encourage you to go back and listen to more of him, the things he says and the way he says it, and just kind of see if you can get a beat on what you feel there. So an interesting thing to note, that, you know, it's caused a lot of speculation. It is whatever, but it's good to know, is the day that Malaya moved away from Daniel's, from where they shared a home, right, with the kiddos, and she moved away with her mom to a nearby county. This is, again, 24 hours after the kids had been reported missing. And very early on, she changed her Facebook profile to single and deleted every picture of that included Daniel. Soon after that, evidently, she deactivated her Facebook account. And then at some point since then, she reactivated it. I was on it earlier. So, you know, it's whatever, but, you know, obviously that's caused people to whisper because people are saying, I'm not sure, like, you left the home where your kids, in theory, wandered away from, and the first thing you're doing is changing your relationship status on Facebook. And this could be, you know, I mean, if we're looking at all angles, like when Bosco said earlier, maybe they're just separating so that, you know, he knows something and he's going to try to protect her. I don't know. Maybe they have nothing to do with it. And kind of like Brian said earlier, keep in mind, like, people say and do weird things when they're trying to cover up other things. So they may not be trying to cover up something horrible with their children. It could be that maybe there was drug use, maybe not. Maybe they were sleeping longer than they should have and their kids went missing and they feel guilty about that. Maybe, you know, who knows? But people do say things that don't add up sometimes. And maybe it doesn't mean they did the bad thing that you think they did. You know, they might just be hiding something else. So, you know, it's, you know, it's whatever. It's definitely one, you know, I hope, you know, and this is when the more you read about this and listen to people talk, you know, I think there have been a lot of certain types of similarities in cases. Again, I know I've referenced Summer Wells so much. If you haven't, go back and listen to that. The child's been missing since 2019, a 5-year-old, coming from very similar looking living circumstances. Again, it was conversation about a sliding back door. Again, the family immediately went toward the idea of abduction. Like, there was just, you know, a handful of similarities there. And I hope that that's not the case here. You know, I hope that, because Summer still hasn't been found. And that was, that was almost 6 years ago now, actually. Sebastian Rogers was also out of Tennessee. Do you remember that? That was, I guess, a year ago now. He was an autistic boy, I believe, that went missing from his home, and things just kind of never seemed quite right. And he's never been found. So, you know, I don't know. I do think that hope dwindles in the sense of them being found alive simply because of their ages and where they were. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense now that they would still just be wandering in the woods. And with the amount of searches that have gone on, I think you would think that even if they did succumb to, again, elements or animals or something like that, at least one of them would have been found by now. But I don't know. What are you?
Yeah. I think that, I mean, just based on that limited information, I don't know about the, like, walking out and then just wandering off. I mean, it obviously it's possible they could have gone out and wandered off, but that time frame's got to be a lot more than just immediately. I mean, you know, the word immediately being used.
Right.
And I get it. The worst possible thing has happened to, if you're a loving parent, that, that's a horrible thing. Now you feel guilty, especially if you allow a 4 and 6-year-old to play on their own in the backyard. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but then, you know, if you're doing other stuff and you start to blame yourself, because she spoke about them, and I could be wrong, but
present tense.
Spoke about them in the present tense.
Agreed.
And then that's why I love you. That and she said a mother thinks the worst, or however she phrased it, like the mother always thinks the worst, you know. And at first I'm like, well, actually, no. Usually mothers don't want to think that. But I think what she's saying is
your brain
when you
goes
go in
to
panic
the worst
mode,
possible. Yeah.
Yes, because your kids are not within your grasp. You know, you don't know where they are.
I've told the story on here when the youngest, you know, I misplaced him, like, and it was just miscommunication. It was all perfectly fine. He was exactly where he thought he was supposed to be, which was not where I thought I had told him to be, and it was all fine. But in the about, I don't know, 6 or 7 minutes that felt like an eternity on a very, very, very crowded boardwalk at a beach, peak tourist time, knowing that we were near, you know, an interstate that runs that's known for terrible things, you know, people taking children. I mean, it was very, you know, your brain does go in all the directions. So like, I fully understand when she said that, like that's why you have panic. I mean, your panic is because you think something horrible might happen to them.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know. It's just, it is very sad. It is, I am glad that we're covering it, but I don't like covering cases like this right now because it's so, we can't know what the investigators have. I hate to give out information that's not accurate. And so, you know, it really is all so much rumor mill, or everything that Daniel Martell says. And who's to say? I mean, maybe he's being perfectly honest. Maybe he's not. I don't know. I know that investigators certainly seem to know what they're doing, and they certainly seem to be on a beat. The fact that they continue to go back to that residence, though, continue to, I guess I will say it this way, and this is not to implicate the parents, but when Daniel said, when his reasoning was for the baby to have gone with CPS, with Child Protective Services, because the other 2 kids are missing and it's an investigation, so they want to keep a close lid on things. CPS doesn't take your baby because of that. They don't take your baby because your other 2 have gone missing. They take your baby if they feel like that's not the best place for your baby to be. And it's not because somebody's going to come back and now take this baby. Like, that's not what this is. But that was his reasoning for saying it, right? So he also kind of does the same thing. I'm not sure if you noticed when he talks about the electronics being taken. They came and took his phone. He said he was happy to give it over. Fine. They come back to check for more, you know, an iPad, maybe an Xbox, right? Other computer type systems. And then again for a modem, right? So they're continuously coming back with these searches to get these, or he's willingly, giving them up, these technological items. But what he says is that the reason is so that they can just make sure they can see what all electronics logged into their Wi-Fi, who came in the area. I'm not saying that's not true. I imagine they also want to see what activity's been going on those devices. You know what I'm saying? And that's not the party saying. So just, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. I think that I was going to try to respond to a couple of, maybe they're talking about bees in the chats.
I couldn't keep up.
It says, so Fender J's here says sliding door comment irritates because most old sliding doors aren't quiet. I will say some sliding doors could be. We saw the home, right? Though we saw.
Yeah.
I don't feel like those sliding doors would be that quiet. But it doesn't. But that doesn't make sense, right? Because even still, even if it was quiet, the wording was that, like, in one sentence, it's that, like, oh, we couldn't have heard them leave because it's quiet. These tiny children opened the door, stepped outside, shut the door behind them. Look, the kids in this house are much older than that and hardly shut a door. Shut the door behind them. But in another breath, it's that he thought he heard the sliding door, close. So anyway, go ahead.
Well, we've talked about it. You recreate everything. So if you and I are there and we're going back over the statements, we would sit wherever they were on the bed in this exact same conditions you can do. And then someone else opens that sliding glass door and then closes it. And then you sit there and go, okay, that's actually not that loud. Or, yeah, I can hear that. You can always hear. And you can hear it when a 4 or 6-year-old slams it.
Because that's what that's what they have to do. They have to use. They can't quietly shut it. They have to use their whole body weight to shut it.
Yeah, those are also things that I think one of the comments earlier was alluding to, like patterns. Has anyone ever seen them out playing by themselves? Have they wandered off before? You do ask about patterns like that. Does the 6-year-old have the strength to open and close the sliding glass door? Is this something that other family members would say, yes, they were always known for opening the door on their own, going and playing in the backyard because it's fenced in, and we live out here in a rural area. It's the whole point of living out here.
Right.
Enjoy the backyard. All that stuff, though, you recreate all of it. You go through all the statements, which they're doing. There
had been a vehicle in question that they kind of asked around about, one that had been seen in some footage from days prior. I think that something that gets kind of lost a little bit in the weeds here is the fact that we're talking still about two children. So I'm not saying that 2 children can't be abducted or 2 children can't be whatever. But whenever you think about whatever scenario is in your head about what happened, remember it happened to 2. So I think that could change some things sometimes.
Yeah, that's one of those where then you start to look at it, and if they've got a vehicle, if they've pulled videos several days prior, they start to see a certain vehicle, they want to know who that person is, then you find out, or it's possible that's someone who's been there enough times the kids know, they trust. Again, though, there's a time frame, I think, of probably 2 or 3 hours that I feel like the parents have no clue where the kids are.
Correct. And I think that, and
whether they were abducted or not.
It could be more. I mean, we're going off of the timeline of, we saw them at 8 o'clock in the morning. We, and we called 911 at 10 o'clock in the morning. And that's potentially, they're the last ones to see them at 8. So in theory, they were last seen in public the afternoon prior. So, or not in theory, they were last seen in public the afternoon prior. So potentially, I would like to know, I think if I could have one piece of the puzzle turned over right now, it would be where, if you could follow, if there were red light cameras, I'm not sure if it was kind of a little bit more rural and maybe not have those kinds of things, but if you could track their vehicle wherever, we don't know where they were seen in public on May 1st with family. We don't know if they were in a vehicle, walking, sitting, asleep. We don't know these things. In a bus station or in a CVS, we just don't know. I would like to know where, if you could track the movements of where they were going and what their vehicle was like when it came home that evening. On the 1st. I think that'd be my first
I like it.
thing to want to know. But
Tyler S says he kept making comments earlier about septic tank that potentially.
Well, there's that. Are you talking? Oh, yeah. You mean on their property, Tyler? Sorry, I was getting confused with the pipeline, which is now the current area.
But I think his comments earlier were that if someone had done something like, unaliving them, whatever, that they could hide them in the septic tank. So I don't know.
I would like to think that at this point, any wells on the property, septic tanks, these kinds of things. I would think burn piles, right? A lot of things like that would have been searched at this point. And that's,
well, I was going to say, and that's one of those things, the larger an investigation gets, sometimes the more complicated. And there's a documentary on a missing person in the Chelsea hotel. And I won't tell the spoiler alert, but there was a discrepancy in whether a door to a water tank was locked or unlocked.
These are true crime people. They probably know that one.
Yeah. So, and it's one of those where someone had reported earlier, yes, that latch on that water tank is locked. And so then, if I remember right, nobody was searching the water tank. And of course, the tank was not locked, and actually no one had checked it, if I remember right.
It changes everything.
Yeah, and then you're like, oh, okay, and then check it.
Yep.
But the documentary leading up to that, I think one poor guy was, canceled online, whatever. Anyway, doesn't matter.
I think so. Grabas said Neighbors 2, and I think that question, if I remember when you posted it compared to what we were saying, is in reference to was in reference to like septic tank. Do you mean like maybe potentially like at the neighbor's house as well? And I hate to speculate or say I do assume so, based on the type of response the RCMP has had and the type of grid and search area that they've utilized, right? So I would think that they've gone to every surrounding that kind of thing at this point, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, usually when you're searching like that, you're checking all bodies of water. And you're also keying in on bodies of water because that's where kids end up spending the most time.
But I think that if they're saying like maybe potentially under the idea of being concealed, then yes, I think that still would preclude, they would still search all of the neighbors' areas and those kinds of things. She did not go down a drain pipe. Baby Jessica went down a well, and that was traumatizing as a kid. Do you remember Baby Jessica?
Yeah, I do remember that. As a matter of fact, my dad and brother and myself, when I got old enough, worked wells. My brother and dad did it for decades. And I remember that story, and just every time you go out there and pull a pump, or you look at older wells or galvanized piping, and you're just like, oh, that was horrible.
I think that might be one of the first times I remember watching the news when it was like nighttime comes around and they've got all of those flashlights, because they're trying to like lower water down to her. Do you remember all that? And occasionally she cried. Was she like 2, I think, at the time or something? I think she was a toddler.
Yeah. But remember, what was it, 2 years ago when we dressed up as Buffalo Bill?
We did not dress up as Baby Jessica.
No, I know, but people thought that. They saw a picture of you
keep talking
with the well and thought you were Baby Jessica. Like, no. It's terrible. Oh, but real quick, that Chelsea hotel, there was a comments earlier about how crazy that was. And our buddy Nako Nolan is in that documentary. He was he was on patrol at the time. He's a recently retired LA detective sergeant, but he tells some stories in that documentary about that Chelsea hotel and just how wild it was and the things that were going on then. So I don't know. Anyway,
Michael is realizing it was in fact a well that she fell into. I was trying to find.
When you mentioned that about one of the first times, I think that's one of the first times I remember like news coverage, maybe when Reagan got shot when I was a kid, like a little bitty kid.
Oh no, well, then I got the Challenger all day long.
Yes, yeah.
I just mean the first time like thinking like, and she survived. It was kind of one of those where like all these massive efforts and these people that were just like everyday people out there doing this thing, trying to that's when I was not Baby Jessica. but Brian was Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs, and I was the girl in the well. In case you missed that gem a couple years ago.
Oh my gosh.
How do I make that? Yeah.
Oh.
Can't see that. Please take a
Good.
look.
No, it's scary as what it
Your
was.
retired homicide lieutenant.
Absolutely scary. Traumatizing.
She did. Fox said she won't forget because she won. We need to do a contest this year for Halloween. I don't think we did this past year, but it was amazing.
It was.
Yeah. Maybe yes. Actually, I think it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Now I'm getting off in the weeds. Well, you guys, we will wrap it up. I did not think the show would be 2 hours. I thought this was going to be like a 40-minute show because I'm like, there's only so much to talk about. There's not much involved in this case. Tyler, I hope that Tyler was somebody who recommended this case to kind of hear about, and I do hope that we covered everything you want. If you have more information about the case, and you've been following, I think you and your wife have been following it pretty closely. Definitely reach out with any more information you have. Again, it's just tough because it is ongoing and there's only so much to tell without speculation. So, let's see here. All right. Yeah. So I think, what you got?
I think that's it.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk a little bit about disruptors?
Oh, yeah. So what did I have last week? No, 2 weeks ago was Bailey Chase.
Mm-hmm.
And he's an actor. It was on Longmire. Was it Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice?
Mm-hmm.
Saving Grace. But he's on Homestead, which is a movie and a series on the Angel Studio.
Uh-huh.
But great guy. Had fun on that episode. And then last week was a guy that I met in teaching a gang class, and he and I worked in somewhat the same area in law enforcement, and we were cross paths at these gang intel meetings, and we always shared information and got to be really good friends. And then I learned that he had guarded Saddam Hussein and was actually Saddam Hussein's favorite MP guard.
That's a wild one. You guys, I know that I often suggest Brian shows. I would say right now that maybe Bailey Chase was fun. Like that was a great interview for sure. But in terms of like the information gleaned from the one with the bodyguard because this guy wasn't 50 years old guarding Saddam. He was like 19. So they kind of get into what that means. Why would a kind of lower level MP at 19 years old be the one selected to guard Saddam? And I think that Brian has a pretty interesting take on that, and I have to agree with you. Anyway, it's interesting to hear him speak about his time there with Saddam and then the years that have followed, and kind of having to process his feelings about it all because he got to know him as just like a guy. Every day he went to work, and he's very closely intertwined with this man who was actually just very kind to him. And he'd have to, later over the years, separate what he knows between, a manipulator, a dictator, these kinds of things from also just human nature of having a good conversation and smoking a cigar with the guy. So he talks about, and I won't give away any specifics there, but he does speak about his time closely with him for all of the time that he had leading up to Saddam's and during the execution there. And then just kind of his process of all of that through his thoughts and everything all these years later. So anyway, I highly recommend it. It's the first time that he's spoken about that. Brian's not, which I know you're not salacious. You're not trying to like grab whatever numbers and things like that. But, neither one of them are advertising it like that. I'm like, holy cow, we've really not. Yeah. I don't think the public's heard a whole lot about anyone who kind of had that perspective and that job at that time without somebody writing a big book or making it seem all shiny. This guy's just like, no, I was really confused. I was 19 and like, it felt weird when he died, but I know he did really bad things, right? Like, that's about as simplistic as you can make it, but it was a very interesting.
Yeah, he and I had talked about it, and he's like, "Yeah, man, I'll jump on there because we're talkers anyway." I think it did him some good, he enjoyed the conversation, and I think he started processing this stuff now, like you just said. So, and if everything goes as scheduled, I'm dropping one tomorrow. A guy who served time in Sheriff Arapaio, is that how you say it? The jail down in Arizona. But the guest that I'm dropping tomorrow, Shane Watson, silverladder.com. He talks about battles with addiction, and he has like a 3,000 record collection. So we talk music. I know what
you're really going to be talking about.
Yeah, we talk music, we talk addiction, we talk about some of the stuff he's done, training law enforcement and stuff. So, but he's not a cop. Very cool, down to earth guy. And if everything goes as planned, I'll be scheduling or recording an episode with the guy that a lot of people sent me when he was on Joe Rogan. This guy, Scott Payne, aka Big Country. He was an undercover FBI agent for like 20 something years.
Okay.
Tells some crazy stories. But I reached out to him and he was like, yeah, let's do it. So hopefully we're going to record an episode next week.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right. They're getting silly. This is funny. Again, if you are listening to the audio show, we're wrapping it up now, but you can always join us in the chats. We enjoy it. We love seeing, we saw a couple new names tonight. I always like to see a couple new names. Mm-hmm. And we got some of our folks that have become what feels like friends now in here. And they're always with us on Tuesday nights, and we love it. And we appreciate you guys so much. Again, though, all you have to do is go on YouTube and just log in. It's free. You use the email that was registered to you at birth, and you type it in, and you can join in the chats anytime. It's pretty much every Tuesday. The season's been a little busy, so we've skipped a week here or there. Go catch up on anything. Catch up on Summer Wells if you haven't. It's horrible, but it's also worth taking a listen. But we appreciate you guys, and I mean, we truly do appreciate you, and we enjoy talking with you every week. And if you don't mind to hit those buttons, subscribe, hit the little thing that makes it download every week or whatever, then you can just sit back and not even think about it.
Yeah.
You can find Brian at Brian Sanders Disruptors on Instagram. He's got a YouTube of the same name. And then again, you can come over to Andrea Uplead on Instagram, and there you can find the photos from this case and all of the other ones that we've covered. So again, keep them coming. Send us your show suggestions. We love it. We love talking to you guys, and we appreciate you so much. Do you have anything that you'd like to say? Would you like to tell the people good night?
Oh, yes.
Yes, you should probably tell them good night.
Good night, everybody.
All right, guys. We appreciate you guys. And until next week, we will see y'all next Tuesday. Good night, y'all.